Christianity was once clearly the predominant religion in America. Is that true today? Dr. William Wagner, director and founder of Olivet Institute for Global Strategic Studies, will address this and tell us about ministry to the immigrant population right here in Marin County, so stay with us.
God chooses the people that He wants to bring revival. Christianity is losing as far as the society is concerned. Secularism is winning. And consequently, the world is changing. The war on Christianity is real. I think it is happening, it's taking place. I'm very much concerned about finding a more effective way to win the world for Jesus Christ.
Welcome back. Dr. William Wagner's background includes 30 years with the Southern Baptist International Board in Eastern and Western Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. He has served as the Professor of Missions and Evangelism at Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary, President of Olivet University, Vice President of the Southern Baptist Convention, and now serves as the Director and Founder of the Olivet Institute for Global Strategic Studies. What a mouthful, but one of his thought-provoking books, widely distributed, is How Islam Plans to Change the World, and we're going to talk about that today as well. You have done so much. I have to ask you this question. What is your perspective on Christianity in America today?
Debbie, that's an excellent question. I might expand a wee bit on that and say, what about Christianity in the Western world? Because that kind of brings in Europe and it brings in the United States. President Obama made a statement not very long ago saying America is not a Christian country. He may possibly be right on that, but yet there is no doubt that Christianity is the dominant religious belief system. But we're also faced very much with a war on Christians in America, and everybody's well aware of that, and there's been books that have been written on this. But you look at the Western Europe, and you see that Western Europe is in the post-Christian era, and they are a few steps ahead of us. And so what is happening in Western Europe, I think, is going to be happening very soon here in the United States. And right now, Western Europe is suffering greatly, and the church is suffering. And I predict that is what's going to be happening here, too. We're still predominantly Christian, but I'm a little bit pessimistic about the future.
So how's the world changed since you served on the Southern Baptist Convention?
Well, it's changed considerably. If you look back at the first century after the birth of Christ, the center of Christianity was in Jerusalem. And then over the years, it moved to the northwest. It moved from Jerusalem to Constantinople to Rome. And then by the 1900s, the center of Christianity had reached Tours, France. That meant that Christianity was moving to the west and it was moving to the north. From 1900 until about the year 2000, the center of Christianity moved from Tours, France to the southern part of Mali in Africa. There has been a rapid change of the center of Christianity, and there are revivals taking place in Africa, Latin America, and Asia that are phenomenal. And consequently, the world is changing, and the center of the Christian missionary message has changed, and it's no longer in the Western world, but it's in what we might want to call the developing world.
So, as Christians in America, what are we to anticipate in the next 10 years?
I think we can anticipate a continuation of being on the defensive. I think that you're going to discover that the war on Christianity is real. I think it is happening, it's taking place. Os Guinness spoke one time here in Marin County, and he said the three major forces that are have to be contended with for Christianity is communist China, Islam, and secularism. Secularism is winning. They are winning the day. Islam has not had that much success.
Are you talking globally, or are you talking in the U.S.?
In the U.S. I'm talking just in the U.S. I'm really hopeful that something will happen with China. The greatest revival in the history of the world is taking place right now in China. So China is a bright spot.
Talk about that for a minute.
What?
Talk about that for a minute.
Okay, you've got to remember that there were missionaries that went to China starting somewhere around 1600. Actually, some of the Catholics were there quite a bit before that time. But up until about 1945, all of these missionaries, Catholic and Protestant together, there were about 2.5 million Christians in China. Communism took over in 45. The bamboo curtain came up. And when the bamboo curtain came down in 1990, that 2.5 million had grown to between 60 and 80 million. And today, there is a rapid expansion of the Christian faith. There is so much receptivity. And there's a revival going on, the greatest revival in the history of the church.
How much of that do you think centered around Young Shou and all he's done over in Asia?
I don't think that, well, Young Shou is, and the Koreans. The Koreans now have 28% of the population are Christians.
Right.
And the revival in Korea was tremendous. I think it had to do with a missiological principle. And see, what happened in 1945, all the missionaries had to leave. And everybody says, oh, when the missionaries can go back, they're going to have to start all over again. And suddenly it was the people that had to grow. It was the people that had to profess their faith, and they had to do the missionary work. And when the people did, it's a lot better than when you have paid missionaries.
So are you saying that that could possibly happen here?
I am saying that, no, I don't believe that's going to happen here. I really don't. I think that what is going to happen is that the United States has been a sending country of missionaries. We're now going to become a receiving country. I know of a lot of Chinese missionaries that are working here now. And we're talking about immigrant churches here in the United States. These Chinese are coming back, and they are doing missionary work, and they are now doing missionary work among Anglos.
And from Australia and others, there are many churches that actually are opening mission work here in the United States, where we are the ones that you send, but they are now bringing people in here to help us.
That's great.
It is great, but it is amazing. Do you want to comment on the global conditions?
The global conditions, I think that we're in a terrible situation. You know, the Bible, Jesus was talking, and they asked him, when is this going to happen, you know, the end days. And there were two things that were supposed to happen, and I could never quite understand it. They seemed to be diametrically opposed. One, that there's going to be many falling away from the faith, and there's going to be persecution, and there's going to be people no longer believing. And on the other side, the gospel is going to be preached to the whole world. These two things are happening simultaneously. In the Western world, there's a falling away of the faith, but the gospel is being preached in the whole world.
So is some of this discussed in the think tank, the new organization that you're working with, that we can talk about when we come back from the break?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. More with Dr. Wagner when we return. We're back with Dr. William Wagner. Will you tell us about the Olivet Institute of Global Strategic Studies, and how new is this organization?
It's brand new. I just formed it not very long ago. I am a missiologist, and a missiologist says, how are we going to win the world? And so what I began to do is I began to say, why are some groups growing and others are not? Now, we used to say, well, we have the Holy Spirit, and if you've got the Holy Spirit, it grows. If you don't have the Holy Spirit, they won't. But why is it that Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world? Why is it that the homosexuals have been so successful? Why is it that the Mormons are growing? Why is it that the Jehovah's Witnesses are growing? And I begin asking this question, why is this happening? That's why I wrote this book, How Islam Plans to Change the World, because they have this strategy. Now, the Muslims have come along, and they've divided strategy planning into three areas. They call it macro strategy, meta, and micro. And I discovered then that these are totally different. The micro is where you strategize to win people and start churches. That's on the very lowest level. The meta is where you develop plans for winning a city or to work in a state, and you have an organization. The macro is when you change the society. So I decided to study 6 groups. The Southern Baptists, the Assemblies of God, Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormons, the Muslims, and the homosexuals. And when I did this, I discovered that of these 6 groups, only 3 of them have a macro strategy in place.
Which are?
They are the Muslims, the Mormons, and the homosexuals. Now, the Baptists and the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Assemblies are very good at the micro, reaching the individuals. But what's happened now is that Christianity is losing as far as the society is concerned. Just to give you an idea, I send my students out. And so I sent my students out one time in Marin. and they were to ask questions. What do you think about Islam? What do you think about the Mormons? And what do you think about the Baptists? The answers were, oh, the Mormons they have kind of a strange belief, but they're family oriented. They love their families. They're honest people, and they have these 2 young missionaries that go out. This is what their answer was. What do you think about the Muslims? Well, the Muslims have a few terrorists, but by and large, it's a world religion, a good religion, and it's a religion of faith. What do you think about the Baptists? Oh, they're homophobes, they're hate mongers, they're conservative fundamentalists. So what has happened is we have lost the battle at this upper level of changing society. And I'm trying to say we've got to make some changes.
So how is this organization going to do that?
Well, it's going to do it by saying what are the basis of culture. And you see, every culture is composed of what I call 10 mountains. I might not be able to give them all, but the mountains of business,
yes,
education, religion, family, media, art and theater. There are 10 mountains, and so we're saying, okay, how can we as evangelicals influence the society at these levels? And the thing that's amazing to me is that groups such as the Southern Baptists and the leadership of the Assembly of God have never really penetrated that level. We're going to try and encourage them to penetrate that level.
So your book that you wrote, you were on this program in November of 2004.
Right.
And we talked about the book that you wrote, How Islam Plans to Take Over the World. So in that book, you had a plan. Here we are 10 years later. Tell me where you think we are. And do you need to update the book?
Well, I've been very impressed with myself.
I thought it was pretty right on.
In the fact that everything that I prophesied has taken place.
Yes, it has. And when we spoke on that, I think of that program often.
Right.
Because I see all these things that are occurring in the world and occurring in the United States, and I'm thinking, Dr. Wagner talked about that.
Yeah, it's happening, it's taking place. Well, the book was so successful that Craigle, my publisher, came back and they said, we want to update it, but we want to put in 3 new chapters. And so I did. I put in 3 new chapters. One chapter was, previously I said there were 3 major areas of their strategy. And I said it was missions, which is dawah, jihad, holy war, and then the whole idea of building a mosque. I created a 4th one, and I put that in, and that's immigration. They've been extremely successful in immigration in Europe, and they're taking over Western Europe at this point. So that was one chapter. The other one was they said, well, what are we going to do about it? Now that Islam is growing, so what are we going to do about it? So I put in a chapter on how to witness to Muslims, how to speak to them, and what we can do as Christians to counter their influence. And then the 3rd one was people said, well, the Muslim Brotherhood is having so much success in Egypt. What is the Muslim Brotherhood? Who are they? So I wrote a whole study on the Muslim Brotherhood, which I think everybody needs to read, because you read about the Muslim Brotherhood, but you don't really know what it is. You know, the Muslim Brotherhood has taken over 2 geographical areas, Gaza and Sudan. Sudan, they've killed about 1 million Christians. Gaza, they're fighting against Israel. They just about got Egypt, but they didn't. So that was the 3rd one.
Well, you know what I also find fascinating about you, Dr. Wagner, all these years, your servants to the Lord has only been affirmed. All the knowledge and everything you've gained, you are only affirmed in your belief system. In addition, what I find really interesting about you is you're so interested in what's going on in the world, but you're also concerned about the community. So you're involved with immigrant churches, a new movement, and especially here in Marin. So I'd like to talk about that when we come back. Okay. More with Dr. Wagner when we return. We're back with Dr. Wagner, and I wanted to show everyone the new updated edition of How Islam Plans to Change the World. A great book. I can't believe that in 2004, When I read through this book, it was so, we have actually lived it out, what you wrote, and now you've even updated it. So how can our viewers get a copy of it?
I believe you can buy it at Amazon, or quite a few Christian bookstores have it. And this edition is just about sold out now, too. I don't know what we're going to do in the future.
You're going to have to keep writing.
Right.
And I do understand you have some other books in the horizon, and you'll come back and talk about those maybe later.
Right.
But what, 5, 7?
5.
5 more books. All right. I want to talk about what's going on in the, basically, I guess the whole Bay Area, maybe further, but specifically in Marin County, and a church that you have started.
Well, you know, you have the whole idea of the immigrant. And let me go back in the history, which may be of interest to you. During the time of the Civil Rights Movement, we had the problem where, and I'm going to speak quite a bit from Baptists, but also evangelicals and Christianity. Blacks could not go to the churches. And so there was a separation. Then, when the Civil Rights Movement came along, suddenly all of the white churches said, we will be able to accept the blacks. And there was no problem on that at all. Now, we were faced with another interesting situation, and that is we were having immigrants coming in from Mexico, from Asia, from other places. And so many of the churches, particularly the Methodist and Presbyterian, said our church services will be integrated. We will not separate them at all. They will come in. And we're working under a missiological term called homogeneous units, which says that there are groups of people that speak the same language, have the same history, same tradition. Some evangelicals and the Baptists said, what we will do is we will create churches for these groups, let them have their own pastor, their own language, their own culture. Some said, aha, that is discriminatory. It wasn't discriminatory, it was actually giving them the opportunity
to
of having their own identity.
Anything that they, whichever one they like.
And so now this has worked out. Right now, if I'm not mistaken, that the gospel is preached in California through the Southern Baptist, through the California Baptist in 85 languages in California every Sunday. And so what I did is I was pastor of an Anglo church up in Rohnert Park.
Right.
And then we started a church at North Bay
Snyder
Farsi.
Lane Baptist you're talking about.
Snyder Lane Baptist is where I'm pastoring.
Right.
But then I'm a missionary at heart. And the way that got started,
and you don't like sleep, for sure. We know that. Yeah.
I used to play racquetball, and there was a girl who was playing racquetball with me, a lady. And she said, I heard you're a pastor. I said, yes. I said, my father's a pastor. I said, oh, that's good. He was a pastor in Tehran, in Iran. Oh, really? And she was Iranian. And I said, well, do you all meet? Well, no. What about if we started a Bible study? So we started a Bible study. Now we have an Iranian church meeting on Friday night at Marin Covenant Church. We have about 50 people coming. And everything is in Farsi except my sermon. But it's translated, yeah. But it is a Farsi identity church. And we have these all over in my church in Rohnert Park. I now have a Spanish church that we started, and it's now 3 times larger than my Anglo church, meeting in my church building.
Now, I know there are churches like the Well that actually speak in English, but then they have interpretations going on in, I think, 6 or 7 different languages at the same time by others, you know, and they have headsets on and they can listen that way. So obviously there are a lot of different ways that people can worship, and anybody's open to any one that they're interested in. But tell me how this Farsi church is going, because they are probably concerned sometimes with issues that relate to their country or different customs that they do.
Absolutely. Sometimes we have big parties, and we have Iranian dances and folk dances, and we're going to have a big one on Friday night after Thanksgiving. So it's going to be kind of an American Farsi type thing, always at Christmas and the Farsi New Year. And we do everything that it would be that make them feel comfortable. But I mean, they're very concerned about the tremendous persecution going on in Iran today about Christians.
Talk about that.
Okay, but there are some men that I know that I've met personally that are now in prison, and there's a lot of them that are being sent to prison. Now, one of the things that's interesting too is I was mentioning this revival in China. Among the Middle East countries, probably there is no country that has more people converting to Christianity than in Iran. Many of them are becoming Christians in Iran itself and outside of Iran. I have baptized 20 people from Iran.
And they come to America for what purpose?
To get away from Islam.
Do you think that trend's going to continue?
Yes.
Are there people this church is praying for now?
Yes.
Can
Is
you
it-
talk
yeah.
about it?
Yeah, you can, and some of them are, some of the ones that we're praying for are, there's some real problems. There's a great organization in London called Elam Ministries that kind of guides all of these things that are happening. But no, it's bad. It's bad in Iran for Christians. Now, it's not only bad in Iran for Christians, but you've read about the destruction of churches in Iraq. You've read about what's happening in Syria. It's terrible what is happening in the Middle East. You see, one of the goals of Islam is to take out Judaism and Christianity from the whole Middle East. That's why they had the Lebanese War, to drive out the Christians from that. That's why they want to get rid of Israel.
We're about to end the program. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience before we go?
No, I'm very much concerned about finding a more effective way to win the world for Jesus Christ. And that's why we have this think tank.
And how can we find out more about it? How can we find out more about it?
I'm created a website, and if you just write me, I'd be glad to give you the website and tell you how to contact it.
And I'll provide that information at the end of the show. You recently spoke at a university commencement, and you said God works through this insignificant, and through one person, great change happens. I can see that actually happens through you, Dr. Wagner.
Well, it's not particularly through me, but God always chooses the strangest people to bring revival. You know, one time there was this great student revival at Asbury, and I thought, God, you wanted to have a college that had a revival. Why did you choose a Methodist when you could choose a Baptist? God chooses the people that He wants to bring revival.
Amen. Well, thank you for being with us today. Through one person, great change happens. Take a moment to think about how you can affect change in your areas of influence. For more information about today's topic, go to williamwagner.olivetuniversity.edu or ktln.tv. KTLN is a donor-supported ministry. Programs like this one are made possible through your generous contributions. Join us again next week.